The Grand Plaza Hotel ballroom was a monument to Marcus's ego. Look at me. And every over-arranged bouquet of white lilies screamed one thing. Every crystal chandelier, every gold-rimmed plate. I smoothed down the fabric of my navy dress, a simple $100 off-the-rack piece that I had chosen specifically to blend into the background. In a room filled with bespoke tuxedos and designer gowns, I was invisible. Exactly the way I'd been for 15 years. Sophie, there you are. Why aren't you mingling? People are starting to notice you're just hovering. My mother's voice cut through the air, sharp and disappointed. She didn't look at my face. She looked at my hemline. I suppose there isn't much to tell them, is there? Still at that little consulting boutique? I took a slow sip of my champagne, the bubbles sharp on my tongue. Yesterday, I had sat at the head of a 30-foot mahogany table and signed the closing documents on a $400 million acquisition. But here, in the family narrative, I was the one who did the small jobs. The work keeps me busy, Mom, I said, my voice a practice neutral. Busy isn't the same as successful, dear, she sighed, her eyes drifting toward Marcus, who was currently holding court at the center of the room. Look at your brother, youngest VP in the history of Sterling Industries, about to marry the CEO's daughter. That is what real legacy looks like. Try not to embarrass him when the VIPs arrive. I bit back a smile. I knew exactly which VIPs were coming. And I knew that Sterling Industries wasn't a legacy. It was a sinking ship, and I was the only person with a lifeboat. Before I show you the moment Marcus realizes his tiny firm sister is actually his new landlord, I have a question. Have you ever let someone underestimate you just to see how far they'd go? Drop a checkmate in the comments. I'm reading every single one. The dynamic of the Mitchell family was built on a single, unwavering lie. That Marcus was the genius and I was the dreamer who needed protection. 15 years ago, I graduated at the top of my class with a dual degree in macroeconomics and data science. Marcus had scraped by with a C average and a reputation for spending more time at the campus pub than the library. But when graduation came, my father didn't look at my transcripts. He looked at Marcus. The business world is a shark tank, Sophie, my father had told me over a celebratory dinner that felt more like a wake. You're too soft. You have a quiet mind. You should find a nice, stable clerical job, something realistic. Marcus, on the other hand, he has the Sterling blood. I've talked to my contacts. He starts at Sterling Industries on Monday. He had used every ounce of his social capital to wedge Marcus into an entry-level VP track. When I mentioned I wanted to start a consultancy firm, Aurora Group, he had laughed so hard he'd nearly choked on his steak. With what money? Your savings from the summer camp job? He'd asked. Don't be a fool. If you want to play at business, go find a boutique firm that needs a secretary. Don't go throwing your life away on a startup that will be bankrupt by Christmas. That was the night I stopped seeking their approval. I didn't tell them when I secured my first $50,000 seed investment from my grandmother's secret inheritance. I didn't tell them when Aurora moved from a kitchen table to a shared office space, or when we landed our first Fortune 500 client. I let them have their narrative. I let Marcus brag about closing deals that were actually handed to him by his mentors. I let them believe I was struggling because it kept them from asking for favors, and more importantly, it kept them from trying to manage my success into the ground. By the time I was 26, I was a millionaire. By 30, I was a ghost. While my family spent a decade celebrating Marcus's climb, I was building a vertical monopoly. Aurora Consulting Group wasn't just a firm, it was a shadow power. We didn't just advise companies, we restructured them. We were the people CEOs called when they were too terrified to admit they were failing. I lived a double life that would have made a spy jealous. I had a penthouse in the city under a holding company name. I had a driver, a personal chef, and a wardrobe of bespoke power suits that stayed locked in a private dressing room. When I visited my parents for Sunday dinner, I drove a 10-year-old sedan and wore the same clerk clothes I'd had since college. The most difficult part was the assistants. "Sophie, I know money is tight," my mother would say, sliding a $50 gift card for a grocery store across the table. "Don't be too proud to take it. We know that little firm of yours doesn't pay much." I would take the card, thank her, and later give it to a homeless shelter. Meanwhile, my personal portfolio was outperforming my father's entire firm by 400%. The irony reached its peak 3 years ago, when Marcus borrowed $50,000 from my parents' retirement fund for his MBA. My parents had called me, not to ask for money, but to tell me they couldn't help me with my rent because Marcus needs it more for his future. "He's going to be a titan, Sophie," my father had said. "You have to understand, his success will lift the whole family. You're just stable, and that's fine." I had sat in my office the next morning and authorized a $2 million donation to a local hospital, just to remind myself that my stability was their entire world 10 times over. I watched Sterling Industries from afar. I saw the rot in their management. I saw how Marcus was losing clients through pure arrogance. And I knew, eventually, the ship would hit the iceberg. I just didn't expect the iceberg to be me. "Still hiding in the corners, Soph?" Marcus's voice boomed across the ballroom, thick with the unearned confidence of a man who had never been told no. He strolled toward me, his new bride, Jessica, draped over his arm like a trophy. Jessica was the daughter of James Harrison, the CEO of Sterling. To Marcus, this marriage was the final piece of his corporate puzzle. "I'm just enjoying the view, Marcus," I said. "It's a beautiful wedding." "It's an expensive one," Jessica giggled, her eyes raking over my navy dress. "But Marcus told me all about your little consulting job. It's so earnest that you're trying to make it on your own. Most girls would have just asked for a handout." "Success comes in many forms, Jessica," I replied. Marcus laughed, a loud, grating sound. "Sure it does, but some forms have more zeros than others. Speaking of which, try to stay out of the way later. Mr. Harrison, my father-in-law, is coming. He doesn't usually do employee events, but for me, he's making an exception. He's the most powerful man in the state, Sophie. Try not to embarrass me with your small business talk." "I wouldn't dream of it," I murmured. I knew exactly why James Harrison was coming. He wasn't coming for the cake. He had been calling my executive assistant for 3 weeks, begging for an emergency meeting with the mysterious CEO of Aurora. Sterling Industries was $200 million in debt, and their board had given Harrison an ultimatum: find a buyer or file for Chapter 11. I had been the one delaying the calls. I wanted the leverage to be absolute. "Just stay by the buffet," Marcus added, patting my shoulder condescendingly. "The real players have work to do tonight." I watched him walk away, his chest puffed out. He had no idea that the real player was currently holding his pink slip in her clutch bag. At 9 p.m., the ballroom doors swung open with a flourish. James Harrison entered, followed by a phalanx of junior executives. The room went quiet. He was a man of steel-gray hair and ironclad reputation. Marcus practically tripped over his own feet rushing to greet him. "Mr. Harrison! James! So glad you could make it!" Marcus gushed, extending a hand. "I'm honored you'd take the time." Harrison didn't even look at him. His eyes were scanning the room with a laser-like focus. When they landed on the back corner, where I was standing by a pillar, his entire face transformed. He didn't just walk toward me. He marched. "Miss Mitchell!" Harrison called out, his voice cutting through the music. The entire Mitchell family froze. Marcus's hand was still hanging in the air, forgotten. "James," I said, stepping forward. "You're late. I thought we agreed on 8:30. "My apologies," Harrison said, reaching me and taking my hand with a level of respect that bordered on reverence. "The board meeting ran late. The creditors are getting restless. I had no idea you'd be at an employee's wedding. I've been trying to get you on the phone for a month." "Employee?" my father sputtered, appearing behind Marcus. "James, what are you— This is Sophie. She's a junior consultant. She's Marcus's sister." Harrison turned to my father, his brow furrowing in genuine confusion. "Junior consultant? Sir, I don't know what you're talking about. This is Sophie Mitchell. She is the founder and CEO of Aurora Consulting Group. She currently owns more of the commercial debt in this city than most banks." The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. I could see the sweat starting to bead on Marcus's forehead. Jessica's wineglass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. "CEO?" Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. "Aurora? That's the firm that's buying us?" "If I decide to sign the papers, yes," I said, my voice cold and clear. "But after hearing your thoughts on small business tonight, Marcus, I'm starting to wonder if the assets are worth the headache." I led my family into a small, velvet-lined library off the main ballroom. The door clicked shut, sealing out the music and the whispers of 300 confused guests. My father was the first to speak, but the negotiator mask he usually wore was crooked. "Sophie, a billionaire? Aurora? Why didn't you tell us? We're your family. We could have helped you grow." "Helped me?" I laughed, a short, sharp sound. "You told me I was too soft for the business world. You told me my dreams were a delusion. You spent 10 years using my savings to fund Marcus's failures while telling me to be realistic." "We were protecting you!" my mother cried. "No, Mom. You were dismissing me. You wanted me to be small because it made Marcus look big. You needed a failure in the family so you could have a titan to worship. Well, the titan is bankrupt, and the failure just bought his company." Marcus was slumped in a leather chair, his wedding tuxedo looking like a costume. "You're going to fire me, aren't you? On my wedding night." "I'm not going to fire you, Marcus," I said, leaning over the desk. "I'm going to do something much worse. I'm going to make you work. No more titles based on bloodlines. No more industry icon seating. If you want a paycheck from Aurora, you start at the bottom, in the mailroom. You'll learn the business from the ground up, just like I did." "You can't do that," my father blustered. "I'm on the board of Sterling." "Not after Monday," I said, sliding a document across the table. "As part of the acquisition, the current board is being dissolved. Every member is being replaced by Aurora's executive team. You're retired, Dad. And Marcus?" Jessica's father already signed the proxy. He'd rather his daughter stay married to a mailroom clerk than be the wife of a man who bankrupted his legacy. I pulled out a tablet and flicked it toward the large screen on the library wall. "Let's look at the success you all were so proud of," I said. A graph appeared, showing Sterling Industries' performance over the last 5 years. It looked like a cliff. "Marcus, in your 3 years as VP, you lost the Henderson account, the global logistics contract, and you overspent the marketing budget by 300% on client entertainment that resulted in 0 new business. You didn't climb the ladder, you greased the rungs and fell down them. The only reason Sterling is still standing is because James Harrison has been funneling his personal wealth into the payroll to keep the lights on." I turned to my parents. "And you? You took $50,000 of my grandmother's inheritance, the money she specifically left for my business, and gave it to Marcus for an MBA he barely finished. You told me it was for the family. Well, here is the family bill. I swiped to the next slide. It was a list of every loan, every gift, and every handout they had given Marcus over 15 years, adjusted for inflation. The total was nearly $1.2 million. I've already had my legal team draft the repayment schedule, I said. Since you're so fond of Marcus's future, you can use his new mailroom salary to start paying back the estate. Or I can simply file a civil suit for the fraudulent transfer of my grandmother's trust. Your choice. Sophie, please, my mother whispered. It was just, we thought you were okay. You never complained. Because I was too busy building an empire to cry about your neglect. I snapped. I didn't need your money. I didn't even need your pride. I just needed you to be honest. But you weren't. You were so blinded by the golden sun that you missed the fact that your daughter was the one holding the gold. The library door opened and James Harrison stepped back in. He looked at the shattered expressions of the Mitchell family and then at me. The board is ready to sign, Sophie. They've seen the liquidity proof. We're ready to announce the Aurora Sterling merger. Thank you, James, I said. I stood up and straightened my navy dress. It didn't look simple anymore. In this light, in this room, it looked like a shroud. I turned back to Marcus. Go back to your wedding, Marcus. Enjoy the champagne. It's the last bottle you'll drink that you didn't pay for with your own sweat. And Jessica? I'd start looking into prenuptial agreements, because your husband is about to become the most realistic man you've ever met. As I walked back into the ballroom, the crowd parted for me. The whispers had changed. They weren't asking, "Who is she?" anymore. They were saying my name. Ms. Mitchell, a word on the tech sector? Sophie, are you looking for new partners? I ignored them all. I walked straight to the center of the room, where the band was playing a slow, sweeping waltz. I found my grandmother's locket around my neck and held it tight. She had been the only one who told me that my quiet mind was actually a weapon. James, I said to Harrison as we reached the bar, I want the Sterling sign taken down by Monday morning. I want the new Aurora branding up. And I want a full audit of the executive expenses. I have a feeling my brother isn't the only one who thinks business means a free lunch. Consider it done, CEO, Harrison smiled. I looked at the simple navy dress in the mirror behind the bar. I had spent 15 years being a ghost, but tonight the ghost had finally come home, and the house was mine. My phone was a cemetery of missed calls. My father had left 12 messages, his voice progressing from anger to desperation to a weird, groveling subservience that made my stomach turn. Sophie, sweetheart, I was just thinking, with your new position, we should really look at the Mitchell Family Trust. I have some ideas for... I deleted it before he could finish. The most satisfying moment, however, wasn't the headlines. It was the email I received at 10 a.m. from Sterling's HR department. It was a CC on a formal orientation letter. Subject: Welcome to the team, Marcus Mitchell. Position: Logistics Assistant, Level 1. Starting salary: $38,000. Reporting to Sarah Jenkins, Head of Logistics. I knew Sarah Jenkins. She was a woman I'd hired 3 years ago because she was brilliant, focused, and had been passed over for promotion at her old job because she was too quiet. She would have no patience for Marcus's excuses. My mother sent a text. We're so proud of you. Dinner Sunday? We can celebrate properly. I typed back. I'm busy, Mom. Managing my tiny firm takes a lot of work. Maybe in 15 years. I put my phone face down on the desk. For the first time in my life, the air in my office felt perfectly balanced. I had spent my life seeking a seat at their table, only to realize I was the one who owned the room. 6 months later, Sterling Industries was profitable for the first time in a decade. We had cut the bloat, fired the drinking buddies on the board, and refocused on the core technology that Elias had actually built. Marcus was still in the mailroom. From what I heard, he had lost 20 pounds, stopped drinking during the day, and was actually starting to understand how a ledger worked. Jessica had stayed, mostly because her father had threatened to cut her off if she didn't help Marcus become a man. My parents had moved to a smaller house. Without my charity and without the sterling prestige to lean on, they had to face the reality of their own finances. They still called, but the tone had changed. They didn't offer advice anymore. They asked for it. I sat in my penthouse, looking out at the skyline. I had realized that the best part of the reveal wasn't the humiliation of my family. It was the freedom of no longer having to play small. I didn't need the navy dress anymore. I opened my drawer and took out a photo of the artistic black sheep from college. I looked at that girl, the one who was told she wasn't enough. "We did it," I whispered. I had built an empire in the silence, and now the world was finally listening. But I realized I didn't need them to listen to be happy. I just needed to be right. 6 months later, Sterling Industries was profitable for the first time in a decade. We had cut the bloat, fired the drinking buddies on the board, and refocused on the core technology that Elias had actually built. Marcus was still in the mailroom. From what I heard, he had lost 20 pounds, stopped drinking during the day, and was actually starting to understand how a ledger worked. Jessica had stayed, mostly because her father had threatened to cut her off if she didn't help Marcus become a man. My parents had moved to a smaller house. Without my charity and without the sterling prestige to lean on, they had to face the reality of their own finances. They still called, but the tone had changed. They didn't offer advice anymore. They asked for it. I sat in my penthouse, looking out at the skyline. I had realized that the best part of the reveal wasn't the humiliation of my family. It was the freedom of no longer having to play small. I didn't need the navy dress anymore. I opened my drawer and took out a photo of the artistic black sheep from college. I looked at that girl, the one who was told she wasn't enough. "We did it," I whispered. I had built an empire in the silence, and now the world was finally listening. But I realized I didn't need them to listen to be happy. I just needed to be right.